I'd like to talk about men are from Mars, women are from the moon. And the topic is really has to do with the connection between women and Rosh Chodesh. So, has anybody here ever heard of a connection between women and Rosh Chodesh? Everybody's heard of a connection between women and Rosh Chodesh. Has anybody ever understood the connection between women and Rosh Chodesh? Not really. Maybe. Okay. So what I want to try to do today, and there are source sheets over here if anybody needs. I want to discuss. The connection between women and Rosh Chodesh. There are more source sheets over here. Connection between women and Rosh Chodesh. So I want to start with seeing that there is such a connection, and it's not just a made-up thing. So the Shulchan Aruch tells us in source number 1, Rosh Chodesh mutter ba'asiyas melacha. That Rosh Chodesh you're allowed to do melacha, you're allowed to drive to work, you're allowed to drive to shul, you're allowed to go to work. V'anashim shenohago shelo lasos b'melacha hu min hatov. Women who don't do work on Rosh Chodesh, it's a min hatov. Now the technical details of what exactly is considered work and what exactly is not considered melacha is not our discussion for today. But by telling us that women who have a minhag not to do malacha, it's a minhag tov, it's clearly showing us that there's something special about Rosh Chodesh, that it's a nice minhag for women not to do malacha, not to do work on Rosh Chodesh. That's what we see in the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, what's the reason for this minhag? So the Mishnah Berurah says, Hu minhag tov, it's a good minhag, it's a good custom. Nitan lahem Rosh Chodesh liyantiv. The reason that it's a good custom for women not to do work on Rosh Chodesh is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the rabbis, gave women Rosh Chodesh as a yantiv. Very interesting. So what's the connection between women and Rosh Chodesh? Women are not supposed to do work. It's nice for them not to do work because at the end of the day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah, the rabbis gave women Rosh Chodesh as a yantiv. The question now we need to obviously ask ourselves is, first of all, it's not a real yantiv. Again, we're saying that it's a nice minute not to do work, but it doesn't mean you have to sit home and you can't do anything. But what we need to understand is why exactly would Rosh Chodesh be a yantiv for women? Now, in order to do so, we need to go back a little bit in time, and we need to figure out when exactly this connection was made between women and Rosh Chodesh. So let's go back for a minute, and let's go back to Sefer Shmos. Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to get the Torah. What day does Moshe Rabbeinu go up? What day does Moshe Rabbeinu go up? On the 7th of Sivan. Right? We have Kabbalah Torah. Now he goes up to get the Luchos. So he goes up on the 7th of Sivan, the day after Shavuot. It's the day after we got Anochi Hashem Elokecha, after we got the Aseret HaDibros. So he goes up on the 7th of Sivan and he tells them, I just want you to know when I'm coming back. I'm taking vacation. I'm taking vacation for how long? 40 days. But Moshe Rabbeinu says, I'm taking vacation for 40 days and I'm going to come back in the morning. Okay. So they thought that the first day, the 7th day of Sivan, was included in the count of the 40. And therefore they figured that he would be back on the 16th day of Tammuz. That's what the people thought. Moshe meant, when he went away, that he'd be gone for a full 40 days and 40 nights, and therefore, in fact, he would be returning on the 17th day of Tammuz. So what happens on the 16th day of Tammuz when noon comes? So they're waiting for him in the morning, he doesn't come. Now noon comes, and all of a sudden the people are getting really, really nervous. Moshe Rabbeinu is not back. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's dead. So people get nervous. And not only that, so what does the Satan do? The Satan creates a darkness in the world, and he shows them a vision of Moshe Rabbeinu who is dead being carried in Shamayim. That's what happens. So what do they go ahead and they do? Well, let's see. So let's go to Shmos now, and let's see what happens next. Vayar ha'am ki boshesh Moshe in source number 3. The Am sees that Moshe is boshesh, Moshe is delayed la redet minahar. And again, this is on the 16th day of Sivan. But 16th day of Tammuz, 40 days after Sivan. Vayikahel ha'am al Aron, and they gather on Aaron. Vayomru elav, and they say to him, Kuma seilanu Elohim. Let's make a God asher yelchu lifanenu. Let's make a God who will go in front of us. Kizem Moshe ha'ish asher elanu me'eretz Mitzrayim lo yadanu meha yolo. We don't know what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu. Now many explain that Maybe this was lishma. Maybe they really weren't trying to sin. They just wanted to make a conduit to Hashem, a physical presence that they could sort of relate to God now that Moshe Rabbeinu is gone. But either way, they want to make this connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because Moshe Rabbeinu is no longer here, or so they think. So what does Aaron say to them? Vayomer aleim Aaron, Parku nizmei hazahav asher biaznei neshechem, v'nechem uvnosechem. Go ahead and remove the pieces of gold jewelry that are in the ears of your wives, your sons. Okay, I guess the sons wore nice gold jewelry. Uvnosechem, and your daughters. V'haviyu elai, bring me all the jewelry, and I'll make this thing for you. What are they about to make? The Egel Hazav. Vayitparku kol ha'am et nizmei hazahav asher bi'aznehem vayaviu el Aharon. So they went and they took all of the nizmei hazahav in the ears and they brought it to Aaron. Vayikach miyadam, and Aaron took it. Vayaser ato b'chared, he bound it up in some type of cloth. Vayasehu egel masecha, and he makes a golden calf. Vayomru, and they say, Eila Elohecha Yisrael asher ha'alucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. This is the God that took us out of Egypt. Fine. What do you notice over here? What does Aaron HaKohen tell them to do? What does Aaron tell them to do?
Take it from the women.
Take it from the woman and the sons and the daughters. Okay, look at the next pasuk. Vayitparku kol ha'am et nizmei hazahav asher bi'aznehem. They didn't take it from the woman. They didn't take it from their daughters. They took it from themselves. It sounds like that was like the fashion. Like every generation has their fashion. So everybody there used to wear gold jewelry, gold earrings. They had a lot of gold. I mean, they just came out of Egypt. So what do they do over here? So Aaron said, go take it from your wives. And they went ahead and they took it from themselves. Why? So the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, which is a midrashic work on the Torah, which many understood or understand originated with the Tana Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus, who lived around 100 CE, between 100 and 118 CE, who was a disciple of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And he was a teacher of Rabbi Akiva. He was a student of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, teacher of Rabbi Akiva. So the Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer says something very fascinating in source number 4. Dan Aharon din beino lebein atzmo. Aaron said the following thing to himself. And as we'll see in a second, Aaron was trying to stall. Aaron didn't want them building the Egel Hazav. Imani omer lahem tenuli kesev v'zahav. If I tell them to give me the gold and the silver, miyad hey miviyim, they'll give it to me right away. El hareni omer lahem, what am I going to tell them to do? Tenuli nizmei nishechem v'nizmei bnechem uvnosechem umiyad hadavar batel. So what I'm going to tell them to do, since I don't really want them doing the thing and building Egel Hazav, is I want them to go ahead and ask their wives and their sons and their daughters for their jewelry. Shene'amar vayomer lehem Aaron pirku nizmei hazahav asher bi'aznei neshechem nechem notechem. What happened? Shamu hanashim v'lo ratzu v'lo kiblu alein litein nizmei leba'alein. They didn't want to give away the jewelry to your husbands. And as we'll see in a second, it's not because of what you might think, because they didn't want to part with their jewelry. It's because they didn't want their husbands using the jewelry to go ahead and sin, to build the Egel Hazav. Ela amru lahem, what did he say to them? The woman said, you're going to use our jewelry to make up this disgusting thing, to make up this conduit to God, to make up this disgusting ego, which is not going to have any powers. What are you doing? Lo nishma lachem. We're not going to listen to you. That's what the woman said. Now, what happened? Well, the men, sometimes men don't listen to women. So the men didn't listen to the woman, and they went ahead. And sometimes when men don't listen to women, the women are actually right. So the men went ahead, they didn't listen to the woman. I have to be careful what I say. I have to remember if I'm talking to a men's chair or a woman's chair. I change what I say based on who I'm talking to. So we say over here that the woman said, I'm not giving it to you. And therefore, they went ahead and they did it themselves. So what happened? V'natan lahem HaKadosh Baruch Hu scharan ba'olam hazeh. Shehem mishmarot roshei chadashim yoter min ha'anashim. The reward that the woman received, even though at the end of the day the men didn't listen to them, the reward that they received for not participating in the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the golden calf, was that they get Rosh Chodesh as an extra yantiv. So that's the answer to our question. Why do they have Rosh Chodesh as an extra yantiv? Because they did not participate in the sin of the golden calf. But not just that. The women are going to get more than that. V'natan lahem schar li'olam haba. And he also gave them a reward in olam haba. What's the reward for you in olam haba? Shehein atidot lehitchadesh kimo roshei chadashim. Because they are eventually going to renew themselves like Rosh Chodesh renews itself. So those are the two rewards that women got for not participating in the Chet Egel. They got one in this world and one in the next world. What's the reward in this world? They get an extra yontiv, a quasi-yontiv. They get Rosh Chodesh. What's the reward in the next world? They get to renew themselves like Rosh Chodesh. So again, the answer to our question, why is Rosh Chodesh a quasi-yontiv for women? It was a reward for not participating in the Chet Egel. Now, we could stop here, but then we would go home with a lot of questions. Because the obvious question would be, first of all, why is Rosh Chodesh, very nice, I know what the fact is now, but why is Rosh Chodesh the reward for not participating in the Chet Egel? And second of all, what exactly is this reward, and how is it connected to Chet Egel? What exactly is this reward that we're saying that in the next world, women will renew themselves like the moon? Those are the two questions. What's the connection? I understand what Rosh Chodesh is, so I'm giving you as a quasi-yontiv. What's the connection that I'm giving you Rosh Chodesh as a quasi-yontiv based on the fact that you didn't participate in the Chet Egel? And also, what exactly is this reward, and how is it connected to the Chet Egel that you're going to renew yourselves in the next world? Fine. So in order to speak about Rosh Chodesh, and in order to speak about renewing oneself like Rosh Chodesh, obviously we need to speak about one thing. What do we need to speak about when we think of Rosh Chodesh?
The moon.
The moon. We need to speak about the moon. Because after all, Rosh Chodesh, by definition, is the new moon. I mean, back in the day, the new moon was declared through witnesses. Now we have a set calendar. So today we look on the calendar, what day is Rosh Chodesh? Is it 1 day? Is it 2 days? We announce it in shul the week before, etc. Everything is fine. But back then, how did they declare Rosh Chodesh? When the Eidim came and said, and they saw the new moon, and they checked out the Eidim, and everything was fine. And then again, the whole Mishnah over there, they had to send out the messengers to let people know. You think you don't have enough time to prepare for Pesach. Imagine when you really don't have enough time to prepare for Pesach, because the messengers don't get to you. So the new messengers would go, but it was all based on the new moon. Okay, so let's see for a second the connection inside, in Shmos, in source number 5. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe v'el Aaron be'eretz Mitzrayim lemor. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe v'Aaron, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim Rishonu lachem l'chadshei Hashanah. So simple understanding is this month is the first month. That's what we always say. Nisan, in the counting of the Jewish calendar, even though Tishrei is when Rosh Hashanah is, Nisan is the counting. When we say month number 1, that is Nisan. Tishrei is the beginning of the new year. That's when we have Rosh Hashanah, etc. But when I tell you what's the first month, if I wake up in the middle of the night, what's the first month on the Jewish calendar? The answer is Nisan. Fine. And then anywhere in Tanakh, when we talk about the third month, so that's not going to be Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, it's going to be Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. Sivan will be the third month. So let's see Rashi over here. When Hashem says to Moshe, HaChodesh Hazeh, so what was he doing when he said HaChodesh Hazeh? Fascinating. Hereu levana b'chidusha. He showed him the moon. Ve'amar lo, and he said to him, look at this moon. Kisheyahareach mischadesh yeh lecha Rosh Chodesh. Look at this moon. We're at the beginning of the month. When you see the moon look like that, that's Rosh Chodesh. And that's not just the pshat. The pshat is that it's talking about Nisan, and Nisan is the first month, as he says, Iyar is Sheni, and Sivan is Shlishi. But again, we see over here that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, HaChodesh hazeh lachem Rosh Chadashim, it means, how do you know that it's Rosh Chodesh? It's all based on the new moon. Look at the next Rashi. Niskashem Moshe Amol el Halavana. He said, how big does it need to be in order to declare Rosh Chodesh? Be'ezah shir tireh v'tiyeh ruyah lekadesh. V'herelo be'etzbes halavana b'irkiyah. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed him with his etzbah, with his finger. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a finger, but Kiviyachol has shown him with his finger. This is how big it needs to be. V'amar lo kazeh ra'ah v'kadesh. If you see it to be this much, then you can go ahead and you can be Mekadesh. But again, we see clearly the connection between Rosh Chodesh and the new moon. Fine. So therefore, going back to now we're on the next page, but going back to our discussion now. So going back to our discussion, so now when we speak about Rosh Chodesh being the reward for not participating in the Chet Egel, it must be connected somehow to the new moon, or to the moon. And when we speak about women renewing themselves in the next world, in Olam Haba, in the times of Mashiach, like Rosh Chodesh, that it means that women are going to renew themselves like the moon. So everything here is connected to the moon. So let's dig a little bit deeper, and in order to understand now, we need to understand a little bit more about the moon. Once we understand about the moon, we'll understand why the moon was given as the reward for not participating in the Chet Egel, and we'll understand what exactly it means that women will renew themselves like the moon at the end of days, at the times of Mashiach. Okay. When are we first introduced to the moon? So we're first introduced to the moon in source number 7, in Bereshis, Parak Aleph. Vayomer Elohim yihi meros b'kiyah shamayim lehavdil bein hayom u'bein halayla. You can have two things up in the sky between day and night. Vayulo tos l'modim le'yimim v'shanim. You're going to use them for various signs and to make the holidays. Vayulim meros b'kiyah shamayim la'yir al-artz vayichein. And they're going to give light. Vayas Elohim et shnei hameorot hagedolim. And God made these two large luminaries. Et ha'maor hagadol lememshelet hayom, the large luminary to shine during the day. V'es ha'maor hakatan lememshelet halayla, and the small luminary to shine at night. V'eta kochavim, and he made the stars. V'yiten otam berkiyah shamayim lahir al-artz, he put them in the sky, in the rakia. V'limsho bayom u'valayla, to rule during the day and night. U'lavdil ben ha'or ben ha'choshev v'yar Elohim kitov. V'yerev v'yivoker yom revi'i. What's the famous question that's asked on Pasuk number 16, on Tez Zayin? There's a famous suggestion and question asked on Pasuk Tez Zayin. Vayas Elohim et shnei hameorot hagedolim. He made the two large luminaries, es hamaor hagadol lememshelet hayom, v'es hamaor hakaton lememshelet halayla v'eta kochavim. The large luminary to go at day, and the small luminary to shine at night, and the stars. What's the question asked on this Pasuk?
Havdolim are plural.
What?
Havdolim is plural, but one is small.
So, good. What do you notice in the beginning of the pasuk? What does it say? What did God create? Shnei ha-me'orot ha-gedolim. He created two large me'orot, which seems to imply that they were the same size. What do you notice after the Enachta? Es ha'ma'or hagadol lememshelet hayom. You don't even need the pasuk to tell you, because at the end of the day, look up in the sky today and you'll see that it's smaller. But even the pasuk's telling you. 1 second later, after he created these two large luminaries, which seemingly were the same size, one pasuk, or in that same pasuk, it says the large one, the sun, will shine during the day, and the small one, the moon, will shine at night. What happened? You just created two luminaries the same exact size. 5 seconds later, you're telling me one is large and one is small. So did he not create two of them the same size? Or did he create two of them the same size, and then all of a sudden something happened to the moon? So let's see the Gemara, which is mentioned by Rashi. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi Rami. Kesiv vayas Elohim et shnei hameorot hagedolim. He asks a question. That God made two large luminaries, uchtiv et hamaor hagadol v'et hamaor hakatan. And then he goes ahead and he mentions the large luminary and the small luminary. So what's going on over here? Amra yareach lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The moon, after both of them were created the same size, seemingly the size of the sun. The moon used to be that big, the size of the sun. Now we don't really know exactly how big the sun is because you can't really look at it, but the sun is a lot larger than the moon. So the moon goes to God and says, excuse me, God, Ribono shel Olam, Efshar l'shnei melachim sheyishtamshu beketer echad? Is it possible for two melachim, two kings, i.e., myself and the sun, to share one crown? We can't both be in the sky and be the same size. Somebody's got to be in charge up here. What does God say to him? Amar la lechi ume'ati et atzmecha. You're complaining? Go make yourself smaller. Very interesting. Amra lefanav. So he said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribona shel Olam, Hoel ve'amarti lefanecha davar hagun amid et atzmi. It's one thing if I call out in class and you punish me. But when I ask a good question in class, you can't kick me out of the room. I asked you a good question. How is it possible for two kings to share one crown? How can we be the same size? So how can you punish me and make me smaller because I asked you a good question? So what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu say? Chaz yedilo misvadaita. He thought he'd just be able to push the kid away. The kid's stubborn. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Haviu kapara alai shemi'at diaterech. I don't know if you ever heard this Gemara. It's a fascinating Gemara. And there's a lot to say on this Gemara, but we're going to take one approach. Hare kapara lefanai shemi'at diaterech. You know what God says? You're right. I shouldn't have punished you. It sounds like he makes him small. Now that I made you small, you're right. I made a mistake. You had a good argument. Chatati aviti pashati. God says, I want you to bring, not you, I want the Jewish people to bring a korban, a sacrifice on my behalf, because I sinned by making the moon small. Wow. V'hainu de'amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, and that's what Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish points out. Man nishtana sa'ir shel Rosh Chodesh shenemar bo l'Hashem. There's a sa'ir that we'll see in a second, which says that it's a chatas la Hashem, as we'll see in a second, that one of the offerings that they bring, and not just that they bring on Rosh Chodesh, is a chatas la Hashem, which makes sense. Rosh Chodesh is connected to the moon. They bring a sin offering from God. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Sa'ir ze yehe kapara al shemi'atati et hayareach. Fascinating. God says, I want the Jewish people for all time to bring a korban chatas, a sin offering, on Rosh Chodesh as a kapara to make up for the sin that I did by making the moon small without really having a good reason. That's what the Gemara says. Very fascinating. Okay, I'm sorry, we can call out any time if you have any questions. I'm trying to make it as clear as possible.
Why not just make it bigger?
What?
Why not just make it bigger again?
Ah, good. So we have to understand exactly what this Gemara is going. I mean, come on. This is, I mean, we learn Gemara and we like to think that everything is literal. But was there really, what was this conversation going on between the moon and God? Why did he just make him bigger again? Why did he bring a korban? Why did he tell him to bring a korban? So let's just see where he refers to this korban. It's in the Torah. The Gemara is not making it up. In source number 9, in Bamidbar it says, Usi'ir izim echad lechatas l'Hashem. That on Rosh Chodesh, they need to bring one se'ir as a chatas laHashem, in addition to the olas hatamidi at 70 scope. So they got to bring this se'ir. Fine. What's going on? What's the argument of the moon when he says you can't have two melachim? And why not? Why can't you have two kings and you're both big enough? The sky's pretty large. Look up. The sky's pretty big. There's plenty of room for a sun and a moon. Okay, the moon happens to be a little bit smaller now than the sun, but I think if God would have made the sun and the moon the same size and he would have kept it the same size, everything would have been fine. Nobody would have argued. So what's the argument of the moon? What exactly does it mean that God sort of looks back afterwards and says, okay, you're right. I made a mistake. You shouldn't have become small, and therefore I need you forever, B'nai Yisrael, to bring a sin offering on my behalf. Before we understand this medrash, let's just ask one more question. Let's read Bereshis Aleph. Bereshis bara Elohim es hashamayim v'es haaretz. V'haaretz haisasohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tehom. There was emptiness. There was dark. V'ruach Elohim merachefes al pnei hamayim. And there was a ruach of God. Vayomer Elohim yor vayor. There was light. Vayar Elohim es ha'or kitov. God sees that the light is good. Vayavdel Elohim bein ha'or u'bein ha'choshech. Now he separates between light and darkness. Again, there should be or. There is or. He sees it's good. And after he makes the or, he separates between darkness and light. Now it's interesting. The rabbis tell us in general you can't be medayik. You can't look into every single word of creation because it'll lead to kfirah. You're not going to understand every single word, every single pasuk. But over here, at first glance, Vayar Elohim es ha'or kito, vayavdel Elohim ben or ben hachoshech. He sees the light and he separates the light and the darkness. Vayikra Elohim la'or yom v'lachoshech kara layla. He calls light day and he calls the darkness night. Vayera vayivoker yom echad. What exactly does it mean that God separated this light? So you may have heard the famous Rashi in source number 11. What does Rashi say? Vayar Elohim es ha'or kito vayavdel. And God separates the light. Ra'ehu she'eno kedai lihishtamesh bo risha'im v'hivdilo litzadikim le'atid lavo. Wow. So God takes some light from the light in the world and says, we should really have something special for the tzaddikim in the next world, either in Olam Haba or in the times of Mashiach. We should have some special light. So what does he do? So he takes light on day number 1, and some of the light he separates for the tzaddikim in the world to come at the times of Mashiach. That's what it means, Vayavdel Elohim es ha'or. That's what Rashi tells us. Okay, so we have a few questions which we have to answer now. Number 1. What are the rewards in this world and the next world that we mentioned that are connected to the Chet Egel? What exactly is this reward of getting Rosh Chodesh, and why is it connected to the Chet Egel, the reward that women get in this world for not having sinned and trying to prevent their husbands from sinning in the Chet Egel? And what exactly is this reward that they receive as a result of the Chet Egel, that in the Olam Haba, that at the times of Mashiach, let's say, they're going to renew themselves like the moon? That's the first question, or the first two questions. Then we had the question of what exactly is this Gemara talking about? What was this argument, the back and forth between the moon and HaKadosh Baruch Hu? When he says, make yourself smaller, and he says, no, how can we share? We can't share. And then he says, okay, bring a korban chatas for me, a sin offering. How do we understand that Gemara? And what exactly is this light that God set aside on day number 1 for the tzaddikim at the end of time? Those are the three questions that we have. The woman's reward, the argument and the discussion of the moon and God, and the light that's set aside for the tzaddikim in the next world. So Rav Shimon Schwab, who you may have heard of, who has Sefer Me'ein Beis HaShoeva, Rav Shimon Schwab, who was a Rav in New York, has a beautiful idea which connects all of these questions. And again, this is just one possible idea. There's a prophecy, and we'll just end with source number 12 here on the source sheet before we flip. There's a prophecy in Yeshaya, on the bottom of the second page. There's a prophecy in Yeshaya about the end of days, about the Zman HaMashiach, the next world. V'haya or halivana ki or hachama. That at the end of days, why didn't he just make the moon bigger? Because he's waiting for the end of days. At the end of days, the moon will be restored to the size of the moon. The or hachama yiveh shavatayim ka or shivat hayamim. And the or of the chama will be 7 times that which it was at the time of creation. And the moon will have the same light as the sun. So why did he make it bigger? Because he was waiting until the end of days to make the moon the same size as the sun, i.e. to return the moon to its original size. Fine. So let's go to Rav Schwab and let's see how he plays this whole thing out. Rav Schwab says that everything that we've said so far is connected. V'libi omer li. Rav Schwab says that my heart tells me Sheginizat ha'or latzadikim la'atid lavo, that the or that he put away in the next world, even though again day number 1 it says that he separated the or, v'hidma'atut ha'levana ad hayom sheyimalei Hashem pigimat ha'levana, and the lowering or the making smaller of the moon until the time when he makes it ke'or ha'chama kemo shahaita kodem miyuta einam inyanim nifradim. He says these are not two separate things that happen on day number 1 and day number 4. It's not that on day number 1 he took the or and he put it aside for the tzaddikim, for the times of Mashiach, or for the next world. It's not separate that on day number 4 he took some light and took it away from the moon and he's going to give it back to the moon at the end of days. Ela shelifnei shenidmata halivana haya haor haganuz meir mitocha. What's he saying? The light that he took, which it says, it's not that he took it on day number 1. Assuming, again, you can argue that the moon was created on day number 1 too, and then everything was placed into its places on day number 4, on the appropriate day. That maybe everything was just created in the beginning. So maybe that's how he's learning. Everything was created. But let's just say, for argument's sake, it's not that on day number 1 he put aside the light, and then on day number 4 he made the moon smaller. The very same light that he took away from the moon on day number 4 when he made it smaller, that is the same exact light that the pasuk is talking about when it says Vayavdel Elohim, that God took or and put it away for the tzaddikim in the next world. Very fascinating.
He did that on day 4.
Again, either way, it's fine. He did it on day 4, either he did it on day 1. It doesn't really matter for our discussion. The point is that he didn't do it by itself. It wasn't a separate light. The light that he took, when he took the light from the Levana, from the moon, that is the special light that he refers to, that Rashi refers to. That's the special light that's put aside for the tzaddikim, the special light that's put aside for the world to come. Very interesting. The question is, why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu take the light from the moon and put it aside for the tzaddikim l'olam haba? And what's special about the light of the moon, and why didn't he do it from the light of the sun? What exactly is going on here? V'hayu shnei amerot shavim, ela shemehachama haya meir or hagashmi, umehalevana or haruchni. Wow. So I don't know how he knows this, but it's fascinating. He says that originally, like we said, the sun and the moon were the same size. But they served very, very different purposes. The sun, after all, gives us light. If I ask you, does the moon give you light? So you say on a really dark night, the moon gives you light. But he's saying the purpose of the moon when it was created was not to give light. What was the purpose of the moon? So he says that the sun was created to be the physical light for the world, like it is today. The physical Gashmi light. The moon was created to be the spiritual light. It was the light that would enable anyone and everyone in the world, now nobody existed at the time on day number 4, but it's the light that would enable anyone and everyone in the world to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu clearly. If the moon was as big as it should have been, then what Rosh is saying is that the light coming from the moon, the spiritual light, would have left no doubt as to the authenticity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if the two things would have stayed the same size, and if the light of the sun would have been there to light up the world, and the light of the moon would have been the same size as the sun, then it would have been as if everybody in the world had nevuah. Everybody in the world had prophecy. Everybody in the world had this special connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because again, it was a spiritual light. And if the moon would have stayed that size, everybody in the world, without choice even, would have been serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what Rosh says. And that's what was originally in the world. The physical light, the sun, and the spiritual light, the moon. So now we can understand the Gemara. What was the argument of the moon to God? What was the argument of the moon again? How can you have two kings sharing one crown? So Rav Schwab says, what was the argument over here? Ulefiza taina halevana. Now we go to the second part of that page. She'eno ra'oi sheshnei melachim yishtamshu beketer echad. The moon is saying to Kadosh Baruch Hu, excuse me, sir, with all due respect, but please make up your mind. What exactly is the objective of this world that you just created? What exactly is the purpose of creation? Is the purpose of creation the moon, which is basically to have God self-evident, to have spirituality true, and it's clear to everyone like Nevuah, as if everyone has Nevuah, so that everyone by definition will serve God, not only by definition but by default? Or is the purpose of creation to have a sun, to have a physical world, which has a little bit of spirituality from the moon, but doesn't look very spiritual, and to have a world where men and women need to go ahead and find the spirituality throughout the physicality? That's the argument of the moon. Make up your mind. Is it me, the spiritual world, or is it him, the physical world? So he doesn't get rid of the moon, as you'll notice. He doesn't get, okay, it's a totally physical world. We're going to keep spirituality in the world. But what does the Kadosh Baruch Hu say? He says to the moon, Lech umiyet et atzmecha. You go diminish yourself. You're right. We can't have a fully physical world and a fully spiritual world going head on head to each other. Because at the end of the day, if it's a fully spiritual world, so then by definition it's not a fully physical world. So he says, you moon, diminish yourself. Let's just see back in the thing, Perish. Shehagiloi shel kvod shamayim haba yedei hateva hagashmi, v'hagiloi sheba yedei hashraso haruchanis yavou shneihem al yedei ha'or. V'az hishir HaKadosh Baruch Hu et ha'or hagashmi shegam harisha'im mishtamshim bo, v'hivdil es ha'or haruchni letzadikim la'atid lavo, v'nidmata ha'levana. So that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu answers to the moon. He says, you're right. We can't have a full moon. And again, not the full moon that we have today. You can't have the full moon, the big moon, the same size as the sun, and a sun that's the same size as the moon. He says, you moon, go diminish yourself. You, who symbolizes God, who symbolizes spirituality, who symbolizes truth, you need to diminish yourself a little bit. You could stay in the physical world because we need some spirituality in the physical world, but at the end of the day, you need to be smaller than the sun is. You, the spirituality, needs to take a back seat to the sun, to the physical part of the world. Because at the end of the day, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the purpose of creation is not to have a moon. It's not just to have where everybody has nevuah and nobody has free choice and everybody just serves me out of road and everybody just serves me because they have no choice. As it'll be when? At the end of days. V'ayah Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom ahu yeh Hashem echad u'shmo echad. What's going to be at the end of days? All of a sudden everybody's going to serve God. Because it's the spirituality is going to be so clear to everyone that nobody's going to have any choice but to serve God. But to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's what we say. V'ayah Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. He'll be God over the entire world. Not just the Jews, But right now, that's at the end of days. That's at the times of Mashiach. But right now, in this physical world that we're living in, right now the purpose of creation is to have the sun with a little bit of moon. The purpose of creation is for physical human beings to take the physical world and to find you, the moon, spirituality, to become spiritual people. So I'm going to keep you the moon, but I'm going to make you smaller. I'm going to make you harder to access. But ultimately, if people work hard, they'll be able to find you. They'll be able to find the spiritual truth in this world. And that's what he does. So what does God do when he takes away the light from the moon? In essence, what's he doing? He's taking away some of the spiritual light which the moon represents, and he's setting it aside. Now it makes sense why you're setting it aside for the tzaddikim. Because the spiritual light which the moon represents, it's only fitting that that spiritual light which I'm putting aside, I'm going to be putting it aside for those who serve me, for those who find me in this world, through the physicality are able to use the spiritual light, the smaller spiritual light of the moon, to find me in this physical world. It's only appropriate that as a reward, I'm going to put aside some of the spiritual light for them at the end of days. That's what Rosh explains. Now we just need to understand, so what does it mean now that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs to bring a chatas? Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu bringing a sin offering? So here he says something that's very interesting, and one maybe can argue, but he says something very interesting. He says that when he says he's bringing a sin offering, it doesn't mean a sin offering as the classic understanding. It's not necessarily a lachatas l'Hashem. The pasuk says lachatas l'Hashem. It's not a sin offering because God sinned, so to say. When he took away some of the moon's light, because the moon had a very interesting argument, make up your mind, is it me or is it him? Is it spiritual or is it physical? God says the purpose of this world is to be physical, but obviously we need some spirituality, but you're right, we can't keep you the same size because then people have no choice, and then the world's not a physical world, it's a spiritual world. But when he says to the moon, he says, I'm going to have to tell you, I'm going to tell Bnei Israel that they need to bring a korban on my behalf for making you small. What was the point of that korban? So Rav Schwab says it's not because God sinned. He says that the korban that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was telling the Jewish people to bring for minimizing the moon was a subtle acknowledgement on behalf of God that there's great risk involved with me being BAYT levana. It's not that I sinned by making the moon small. I did what I wanted the purpose of creation to be. To have spirituality, but to have physicality, and you need to search for the spirituality. I didn't want it to be a totally spiritual world where you had nevuah, where you had no choice. But I acknowledge the fact that when I go ahead and I make the moon smaller, I am diminishing, I am hiding spirituality, and there's a great risk involved in creating the world the way that I created it, or in making the world now that I've created it, because again, it sounds like God created this world, and this is a little bit hard to understand, maybe based on what we know from the past. It sounds like when God originally created the world, he created it as a spiritual world where everybody would know God. Because it's only after the fact that he goes ahead and he diminishes the moon. But God is acknowledging that now that I've gone ahead and I've diminished the moon a little bit, I'm acknowledging that there's going to be great risk, that people are going to sin. I acknowledge that it's going to be difficult and that it's a hard thing to do to require people to search for God, to search for spirituality, to search for meaning in a dark and physical world. And therefore it's not necessarily a chatas. And I'm just thinking this now, I didn't think about this before, but maybe that's why it's connected to a chatas. Because by diminishing the moon, I'm going to be causing the Jewish people to have to bring korban chatas later on, because ultimately they're going to sin something that they wouldn't have necessarily done if I never diminished the moon. Because if they didn't diminish the moon, then nobody would ever sin. Everybody would always follow me. So again, according to Rav Schwab, it's not that he's telling Bnei Israel to bring a korban chatas because HaKadosh Baruch Hu sinned. He's telling Bnei Israel, you should bring a korban on my behalf because I acknowledge that when I created the world and the purpose of the world is for you to serve me in this physical world, I understand that that's difficult, and the korban represents that it's a struggle for us to find spirituality in this physical world.
I just say it's kind of interesting that the moon, like the symbolism of the moon with the night and everything, it's usually the nighttime when people do bad things.
Interesting.
Like robberies and thievery, like people are afraid to go out. They might
right.
Like, I mean, all the bad things seem to happen at night.
It's interesting. It's just according to what we're saying, you would think it would be the opposite. You would think that dafka, when the spiritual part of the world is out, at night, when the light is out, even though it's diminished, but at the end of the day it's still out as opposed to during the day. You would think that when the world is totally Gashmi during the day, when it's totally physical during the day, you would think that according to this, more people would maybe. But I don't know. I don't have statistics if there's more crime at night than during the day. It just seems like it's definitely scarier at night than during the day. So that's beautiful. So that explains a lot of what we've spoken about so far. But we're not done yet. Because now we just need to finish by answering the question, how is all of this stuff connected to women? How is it connected to Rosh Chodesh? How is it connected to the Chet HaEgel? Well, so now, what's the reward of giving women Rosh Chodesh as a holiday? And what does it mean that at the end of days, a woman will renew herself like the moon? So Rav Schwab explains beautifully. Rav Schwab explains that the original plan that God had was for women to be the same as the moon. Very interesting. Rav Schwab explains that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's original plan was for women, like the moon, to be the main source of spirituality in this world. Very interesting. What happened? Somebody made a boo-boo. Chava sinned. And when Chava sinned, instead of woman being the main source of spirituality, instead of what she should have been doing was protecting Adam from sinning, in essence, what Chava did, when she sinned, and she caused man to sin as well. And as a result, woman, like the moon, says Rav Schwab, needed to be diminished. And just like the moon can no longer be the main source of spirituality in the world, not because the moon sinned. It's two different reasons. The moon couldn't be the main source of spirituality in the world because, again, if there was a moon, so then the world wouldn't be able to exist the way it exists because there would be no free choice. Everybody would just do whatever God wants. But just like he went ahead and diminished the moon, so too, when Chava sinned, women needed to be diminished and they can no longer be the main source of spirituality in the world. And now men were to serve the purpose of being the main source of spirituality in the world. Now, one can argue. Again, I'm not here to say about women's rights or things like that, but one can argue whether men or women currently serve as the main spiritual source in the world. But clearly, Rosh Rab is arguing that at the time that Chava sinned, woman was supposed to be the main source of spirituality of the world, of the clear recognition of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and when she sinned, she had to take a back seat, and now men need to be the main source of spirituality in this world. What happened by Chet HaEgel? So by Chet HaEgel, woman acted in a way that Chava was supposed to. By Chet HaEgel, the woman tried to protect everyone around them from sin. By refusing to give in their jewelry, by refusing to participate and contribute, so they acted the way that Chava was supposed to act, the way that the world was originally set up, that women are supposed to be the main source of spirituality. They're supposed to protect everyone else from sinning in this world. And that's what they did. They acted as a spiritual wall, trying to protect the men at the time of the Chet HaEgel. And although the men sinned, says Rav Schwab, at the end of the day, what was the reward for women for trying to be the spiritual protection of man during Chet HaEgel? Makes a lot of sense. They were given Rosh Chodesh, the day of the moon, the day of spiritual light, as a yontif. That's what he explains. So again, the woman originally was supposed to act as the main source of spirituality in this world, but Chava sinned. So she had to take a back seat, and now men acted as the main source of spirituality in this world. Comes along the Chet HaEgel, and women once again act as the main source of spirituality. So what happens? God rewards them and says, I'm going to give you Rosh Chodesh as a yontif. Why Rosh Chodesh? Because Rosh Chodesh is the moon, and the moon, as we've been saying, represents spirituality. So for acting as a spiritual barrier, for acting as a spiritual source of the world, they went ahead and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them Rosh Chodesh, gave them the moon, gave them spiritual light as the reward. And we'll end by saying then, what then is the reward for women in the next world that the Medrash refers that they will be renewed like the moon? And Rav Schwab says that in this Zman Mashiach, what did we say is going to happen to the moon? The light of the moon will be restored. It will be the same size that it was at the time of creation. It will ultimately be the same size as the sun. And as a result, as we said, if it would have stayed the same that it was at the time of creation, so then everybody in the world would recognize God, nobody would sin, and everybody would go ahead and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the spiritual light that was taken from the moon and set aside for the tzaddikim, seemingly it sounds like that they're using it currently now. Any tzaddikim in Olam Haba are using that spiritual light now. That spiritual light, at the end of days, at the times of Mashiach, will be restored to the moon, and the moon will once again be the same size that it was at the beginning of time, and it will be able to serve in the same capacity to be the source of spiritual light for the entire world. As we're saying all along, it will give everyone nevuah, it will give everyone prophecy, and it will cause everyone, Jew and non-Jew alike, to believe in and serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if that's so then when we say that at the times of Mashiach, woman will be renewed like the moon, what are we saying in essence? What we mean is that just like the light of the moon will be restored at the times of Mashiach, so too God's original plan for woman will be restored at the times of Mashiach as well. And at the times of Mashiach, once again, says Rav Schwab, it will be a time when women once again play the role that was intended for them in HaKadosh Baruch Hu's original plan. It will be a time when woman, at the end of days, at the Yemot HaMashiach, will once again act as the main spiritual light, as the main source of Yiras Shamayim, not only for themselves, not only for men, but for the entire world. Hope everyone enjoyed. If you have any questions, please feel free to come and ask. So, have a wonderful day, and hopefully we can do this once again.